I moved to 117 Oakwood Lane seeking tranquility. My tech job allowed remote work, and I craved an escape from the constant clamor of the city. The house sat isolated, the nearest neighbor a full quarter-mile away. Perfect. The first few weeks were exactly what I'd hoped for. Birdsong instead of traffic. The silence at night was so complete it felt almost tangible. I remember thinking, how strange, that something empty could feel so heavy. Then it started. Exactly 1 month after I moved in. The digital clock on my nightstand had just blinked 3 a.m. when the jarring ring of the doorbell ripped through the silence. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could possibly be at my door at this hour, on this deserted road? A second ring sounded. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, and crept downstairs. The peephole showed only darkness. The porch light I was sure I'd left on was now off. Despite my fear, I cracked the door open. No one was there, only the still night air and the chirp of crickets. I stepped onto the porch, looking around. My breath plumed in the unexpectedly cold air. I called out. Only an owl hooted back from the distance. Must be kids from town playing a prank. I told myself, going back inside, double-checking the locks. The next day, I installed a motion sensor floodlight above the porch. That night, at precisely 3 a.m., the doorbell rang again, insistently. This time I was prepared. Baseball bat in hand, I rushed downstairs. Through the window, I saw the newly installed floodlight blazing, illuminating an empty front yard. No car.
No footprints.
Nothing to trigger the light. Yet the doorbell continued ringing. Heart pounding, mouth dry, I cracked the door open. Again, nothing. But this time, an unusual cold draft slipped through the opening, carrying the faint smell of cigarette smoke, though no source was visible. I slammed the door shut, engaged all 3 locks, and spent the rest of the night on the sofa, clutching the bat. The following morning, I added a security camera above the door. The rational part of me argued it was a faulty doorbell. The knot of fear in my gut said otherwise. The third night, exactly at 3 a.m., the doorbell rang. This time I was already awake, sitting in the darkened living room. I waited a moment before approaching the door. The porch light was on, the camera recording. I opened the door. Empty. I closed it immediately, pulling up the security footage on my laptop.
Timestamp 3:0 und 0 Sekunden nachts.
The doorbell chime was clear on the audio, but visually, there was absolutely no one there. The doorbell button itself depressed as if pushed by an invisible finger. The room seemed to tilt around me. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked at a 24-hour diner in town. Nursing bitter coffee, I researched the house's history on my phone. Built in the late 1970s by Howard Mercer, a night shift worker. According to local newspaper archives, Mercer habitually arrived home around 3 a.m. after his shift. In 1986, he vanished without a trace. Car in the garage, wallet and keys on the kitchen counter, but Mercer was gone. The case was never solved. The house changed hands numerous times afterward, no one staying more than a few years. Local forums mentioned cold spots, strange noises, feelings of being watched. But no one mentioned a 3 a.m. doorbell. I returned home at dawn. In the daylight, the fear seemed almost laughable. I decided to call an electrician. He came, checked everything, even replaced the doorbell mechanism, and assured me any issues were resolved. Before leaving, he hesitated, looking at the house strangely. When I asked if something was wrong, he just shook his head and suggested I might want to have the house blessed. That night, I prepared for a confrontation. I completely disconnected the doorbell system from its power source. I installed more cameras. I left lights blazing throughout the first floor. 3 a.m. came.
No doorbell.
No sound but my own breathing. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by embarrassment at my overreaction. I was about to head to bed when I heard it. Not the doorbell. 3 distinct knocks on the front door. My blood ran cold. They weren't loud, but deliberate, insistent, as if the knocker knew I was inside, listening, and was in no hurry. Several minutes passed. No more knocks. Finally, I forced myself to the door. The peephole remained empty. I opened the door. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of cigarette smoke. The security lights illuminated a completely empty yard. But standing there in the doorway, I felt I wasn't alone. A tangible presence, like a hand resting on my shoulder. I slammed the door shut, spending the rest of the night huddled in the bedroom. The cameras showed nothing. The next day, I visited the local historical society. The elderly volunteer there wasn't surprised by my questions about Howard Mercer. Local lore, she said, suggested foul play, or perhaps he'd simply walked into the woods and never returned after his wife's death. What caught my attention was when she mentioned Mercer's habit, recounted by former coworkers. He always arrived home precisely at 3 a.m. and signaled his return with 3 knocks on the front door. A routine developed to avoid waking his wife with the doorbell, which he continued even after she passed. That night, I didn't try to sleep. At 3 a.m., the 3 knocks came again. This time, I went straight to the door, a strange curiosity replacing the terror. I opened it. The porch was empty, but the presence was stronger, almost overwhelming. The smell of tobacco was thick. My breath fogged again. I found myself speaking aloud. "Howard Mercer? Are you home?" No voice answered, but the porch light flickered 3 times. That was 6 weeks ago. Every night since, at precisely 3 a.m., 3 knocks. I've gotten used to it. Expect it even. I learned that if I open the door immediately, offer a simple greeting, the chill dissipates and the night passes peacefully. If I ignore it, minor disturbances plague the house until dawn. I've considered moving, but a strange combination of fascination and compassion keeps me here. Howard Mercer is just coming home, repeating a routine ingrained into whatever remains of him. Last week, I started a new ritual. At 2:55 a.m., I make a cup of coffee, place it on the small porch table with an ashtray and a single lit cigarette. At 3 a.m., the knocks come. I open the door, offer my greeting to the empty air, and return to bed. In the morning, the coffee cup is always empty, the cigarette burned down to the filter. The realtor never mentioned I'd have a roommate who only existed at 3 a.m. But as fall turns to winter, I find I don't mind sharing my sanctuary. We've reached an understanding, this ghost and I. He isn't trying to scare me. He just doesn't want to be forgotten. And sometimes, in the quietest hours, I wonder which one of us is truly haunting this house on Oakwood Lane.